This is the Steam controller from HORI, and it's designed to work with any device that runs Steam, but as far as I can tell, for me specifically, this is a perfect companion for the Steam Deck. And there are some drawbacks, but it's still a really good iteration. Now, if you're familiar with HORI, you know that they kind of, don't really like any sort of rumble or vibration working on their controllers. They actually very rarely have any, if any at all, as far as I can tell. But looking at this, there are a lot of features. There's a lot of ways that they integrate naturally into Steam and Steam OS, and more specifically using the Steam Deck in docked mode. But as great as all of these features are, you can't technically buy this controller. This video is sponsored by Flexispot. Listen guys, I'm old. My back isn't what it used to be. And sitting here all day working, I can feel my spine turning into a shrimp. And don't get me wrong, I love doing stuff for this channel. I love doing stuff for my day job. If my boss is watching, I love my job. But something's got to change if I want to, just stand up straight. You know what I'm talking about? Guys, check this out. This is the Flexispot E7pro. You can just push a button and boom, it's like upgrading your life, except instead of your life, it's more of like your back. But you guys get it. Sitting, standing, this thing does both, and it's sturdy, guys. This is so sturdy that you can do push-ups on it if you wanted to. Trust me, I tried. Just trust me. You don't want to see that. Honestly, I feel much more productive just standing there. No more crazy pretzel postures or back pain. You can just stand there confidently, and you can even feel more powerful standing there in the middle of doing things. So yeah, Flexispot E7pro desk, grab one today to upgrade your desk game, and so your back will stop plotting against you. Oh, and follow the link in the description below, and you might as well pick up an ergonomic chair while you're at it. I have one myself, and it's honestly awesome. You can use the code, let me double check this, YTE7P50 for $50 on your E7pro standing desk order. Guys, follow the link below, and your spine will thank you. And thanks to Flexispot for sponsoring this video. Now, I say technically because I did pay money to get this controller over to me, but you can't really buy it officially from HORI themselves or any sort of third-party retailer in the United States. I actually had to buy this from a seller that is based out of Japan that sold it to me through eBay. And that's the really weird thing about this, is that unless you know somebody that lives in Japan, or you're okay buying it from a vendor from Japan to ship it over here in the United States, then, you're kind of out of luck when it comes down to it. But when we convert everything from yen to USD at the time of this recording, 7,980 yen, which is the cost of this controller, is roughly around 53 USD. I paid a little bit more than that in order to get that here in the United States, but if you go onto eBay right now, you can find it for around 70, 75 bucks more or less for this controller. Now, when it comes to colors, I don't really know how to read kanji or Japanese, so I needed to just name these. So there's literally just lime green, purple, white, and black. And those are the four colors that you have in terms of options for this controller. But what does come in the box? Well, it's pretty simple, honestly. You get the controller, you get a USB cable to charge or connect your controller to whatever device it is that you're using. And then in case your computer or whatever it is that you're gaming on does not have Bluetooth, there's a Bluetooth USB dongle that you can use to connect that way. By the way, my manager has been telling me to ask people to subscribe to the channel. Normally I do a little animation like this, and that is enough for me, but she says that I need to verbally ask for people to subscribe to the channel. So if you like the content, if you like what you're seeing, then subscribe to the channel, like the video. It really does help a lot. So thanks guys. Now, depending on what type of input you want to go ahead and use for this, you might either want to go with the Bluetooth or the wired input. X input only works on the wired input, whereas both work on Bluetooth. Based off of what I've seen, both work just fine. I personally just prefer Steam input just to kind of have that native communication between the controller and the Steam Deck itself. And also what I've noticed is when I use X input, I couldn't use the actual capacitive buttons in order to activate gyro, and I could only do that using Steam input. So if you are a person that uses gyro, I would recommend using Steam input just because it's much easier in order to actually get things working that way. The battery life for this controller is rated for 12 hours, and honestly, I've never had any sort of issues in terms of gaming for that much time. I mean, I'm an adult, guys. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I work a full-time job. Like, I haven't had the time to actually dedicate 12 hours of nonstop gameplay in order to figure out whether or not this works. But I've had, sit down sessions that are like, 3-4 hours, and I haven't had any issues with the battery not lasting that entire time that I was playing. So, it lasts. That's all I'm saying, is that it lasts. There are a couple of features that I do want to go ahead and highlight with this controller. First and foremost, the gyro that is on this controller is actually really awesome. I will say that the sensitivity wasn't that great. I needed in order to actually adjust it in order to actually get a better seamless experience, something that you would see with another sort of controller, or even just playing with the Steam Deck itself in handheld mode and not docked. But regardless of that, there are other things here. There are light indicators that are on the front that are there to tell you whether or not your Steam controller is connected to a device, whether or not you're using the Steam input mode versus the X input mode, and then whether or not there's any sort of power delivery that is coming into the controller itself. One of the main features that are missing in this controller that you would expect with any other controller is a motor, a vibration motor, to provide any sort of haptic feedback in the controller. Now, when you look at other controllers that are out there, like the DualSense or the Xbox Series controller, or even the ultimate Bluetooth controller from 8BitDo, you have a vibrating motor. And that is very evident when you start to talk about the weight of this controller in contrast to everything else. Now, when it comes to the HORI Steam Controller, it weighs roughly around 183 grams. The 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth controller is 244 grams. The Nintendo Switch Pro controller is 248 grams. And the PlayStation 5 DualSense is roughly 882 grams. When you throw in the Xbox Series controller into the mix with rechargeable batteries inside, you're looking at 304 grams. So again, this kind of puts into perspective what the other controllers are doing and how they weigh in contrast to this. Now, because of how light it is, it tends to feel cheap. At least when I first got it out of the box, I was kind of like, wow, this feels almost like a toy instead of an actual controller that I would use to game on this. Now, the counter argument to that is that if you have a controller that is more focused towards gyro aiming, like this feels like it is, then you wouldn't have to worry about the vibration or the haptic feedback coming in and disrupting your aiming while you're playing the game. The same thing could be said about using gyro and not getting fatigue from holding the controller and just moving it around as much whenever you're playing in gyroscope mode, whenever you're playing any sort of FPS or third-person shooter that supports that mode. Now, if you aren't using that at all and it's not something that you care about, then that kind of, puts things into perspective. Like you don't really care for it. So I would, at least for me personally, I would want to actually have a vibration motor in there instead for haptic feedback instead of having gyroscope. Now, again, gyro versus vibration, let me know what you think in the comments, because honestly, this is something that is more of a personal preference than anything else. All right, so before we get into anything, I just want you to know that I just connected this, and as you can see, when I first click in, I'm going to click out of this window again, it kind of becomes a little dark, and when you click in, you are in. From here, I'm actually controlling everything with my controller itself. The right analog stick moves the mouse, and if you just push A, it'll take you into wherever it is that you're going. Now, if I use the D-pad, these profile windows that are up top, you can essentially pick whichever one that you want, and if you hit A, you can switch or edit the profile, change the name, revert to default. And the cool thing that I like about this is that you can actually change different things that you want. So if you wanted to re-button or change out the mapping for the buttons, then you can do so. Once you hit A, it'll all you got to do is highlight the one that you want to change. Again, I'm using just a regular controller. I'm using A to pick whatever it is that I want to go ahead and do. And then from here, you can change whatever it is that you want for that specific button and remap it to something else. Once you go into testing, you can see if all of that actually came in and actually registered accordingly, but it's pretty straightforward. There isn't too much crazy stuff going on. Again, if I wanted to return, I could just push start and it'll take me back. You can revert to default if you want to, and again, pretty straightforward in that sense. Now, if we go down to analog sticks, there are a couple of different settings that are here. So you have high sensitivity, normal, low sensitivity, and then from there you have dead zone adjustments, which I personally really like. By default, there isn't too much going on right now. The dead zone is very, very non-existent. But if you wanted to reverse the horizontal or vertical axis, then you can do that as well. Again, very cool stuff that you can do this within the application itself. And then down here, you have the turbo option. So if you wanted to make a specific button turbo mode or whatever, all you have to do is kind of just highlight it, hit A, and then you can change or adjust this turbo speed that's there. I have it on, off by default. I don't like to use turbo that much, but that option is there for you to go ahead and use. Now, when I first connected the controller, there wasn't any sort of actual update or firmware update, which I would expect right up here next to the version 0.9.5. But after that, that's pretty much it. I see that the software down here is a version 1.3.4, but if I hit OK, it kind of just checks to see if there's anything else out there, but that's it. There really isn't anything else when it comes to this software overall. So it's a nice experience to just get things going. But when it comes down to it, it really just depends on what you want to get out of it. It's bare bones, but you can customize different things to get a better overall experience whenever you're using this controller. When it comes to the actual physical build of this controller, there's a lot of inspiration from a lot of facets, but I think that the closest comparison that we have to a major first-party controller would be the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. Now, I did try to use this with my Nintendo Switch. It did not work. I don't know if there was something that I messed up with things. Let me know in the comments below if you have this and you've gotten it to work, but I was only able to get this work with my Windows PC as well as my Steam Deck. Now, when it comes to the actual build quality, the face buttons are pretty similar in terms of clickability, travel distance, and the overall feel of things. I would say that these are slightly stiffer, but very ever so slightly. The D-pad on the Nintendo Switch Pro controller is not the best in the world, and this is right up there. Now, in terms of miss inputs, when I was testing it out, I kind of had to really force it onto the right or the left in order for a miss input to come into play. But in the grand scheme of things, you really have to push it in order for that to happen. So in terms of actual, usability and functionality, it works. But in terms of the feel, there's very little travel distance, very little pivot. I mean, it's pretty much non-existent when it comes down to it, but it still works. There are capacitive buttons that are here if you wanted to go ahead and use the gyro that is built in. And because of how light it is, it's very easy to just get into it. I didn't have to program this specific button or any button at all while I was testing out the gyro, and I tested everything out using Portal. It just works, which is really, really nice. Now, aside from the face buttons, these buttons that are right here, again, if you have a Steam Deck, you know exactly what all of these buttons do, so it's pretty easy to use in that sense. And this is primarily just for connecting to a Steam Deck or any sort of device that you have. On the back side, you are going to have a couple of little triggers that are here. So you have this this little switch that is right here that switches you from Steam input to X input if you wanted to use it for another device. I did try this with the Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, there wasn't any sort of there wasn't any input. It didn't work at all. And if you did get it to work, let me know. Maybe I messed something up while I was testing things out, but I couldn't get it to work at all with Steam input or X input. Here you have the adjustment for the sensitivity of the triggers themselves. On the left side, you have this little curve that is right here, and that essentially means that these turn into analog triggers. Although the travel distance is pretty much non-existent, again, very similar to the actual Switch Pro controller, there's nothing there in terms of travel distance. But if you wanted to go ahead and use it as an analog trigger, then you can do so. If you just want to use it to just, kind of just have an input immediately and it just goes from 0 to 60 without any sort of in between, then you can do so by just flipping it over to the right side. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't really use this for anything like, I don't know, Forza Horizon or whatever it may be, any sort of racing game or anything that requires an actual analog trigger for different sorts of sensitivity that's there. It's just, it doesn't leave the best impression when it comes down to that. On top, you are going to have a USB-C port for connection. Same thing for everything else. I mean, this is a pretty standard controller layout when it comes down to it. The overall feel is nice. The only thing that I don't like, again, is the fact that it feels kind of cheap because of how light this is in contrast to the other controllers that I have that I use to game on the PC and Steam Deck. I do want to mention that there are 2 macro keys that are on the bottom. So if you wanted to go ahead and program these to do any specific things, then you can do so. On the back, you do have your R4 and L4. So if there's anything that you wanted to go ahead and program to do happen over there, then you can do so. I also wanted to mention how easy and seamless it is to use this with your Steam Deck. So pretty much everything that you would expect if you were just using the Steam Deck by itself, you would see in this as well. Same thing with the quick access menu. If you wanted to go ahead and use that, then you can. It's pretty convenient. I actually really like that. So just boom, just like that. And go ahead, if you wanted to go ahead and access that menu, the main menu, that you can. If you wanted to, use start, it's there. It's pretty intuitive. So if you're used to the Steam OS interface on the Steam Deck, then it's pretty honestly awesome to be able to access all of those features without any crazy shortcuts or anything like that you would get with the Xbox Series controller or the DualSense or anything like that. It works, and I think that's the beautiful thing about this thing. So who is this for? Well, when it comes down to it, this is really somebody that is a die-hard Steam Deck fan. Or, well, Steam OS fan, because of how easy it is to integrate everything in there. Also, if you're playing FPS games and you prefer to use gyro over a keyboard and mouse for whatever reason, then hey, this is a valid option for you. For me personally, I don't see myself actually using this any more than I had to for this video, if I'm being 100% honest with you. It's just, there are better controllers that are out there. Personally, I prefer to use either my DualSense Edge or my 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth controller. I feel like these are just better options overall for what I personally want out of my experience whenever I'm gaming, either on my PC or if I'm playing, you know, on the couch or whatever, and I just want to have a better overall experience. That's really the route that I go for. But when it comes down to this, for 50 bucks, it's not bad, but I kind of wish that there was a haptic feedback. I wish that there was a controller that, or at least a version of this controller that had haptic feedback of some kind, even if it's just a regular, you know, no big deal vibrating motor controller. I want that. I don't necessarily care for gyro too much because of the games that I play. So again, this is my own personal biases or bias, I don't know, but this is just my own personal preference when it comes down to my experience with the controllers overall. So what do you guys think of the HORI Steam Controller, or the wireless HORI controller for Steam, according from the official website? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I love to hear your thoughts on things. And if you have one for yourself, let me know what you guys think. But if you want to hear my thoughts on the GPD WinMax 2, then click this video over here. It's essentially a Steam Deck and a Windows laptop all in one. It's a crazy experience. And if you want to hear my thoughts on the MSI Claw after roughly 6 months later, click this video over here. And until next time, guys, I will see you on the next one. Peace.